Hey everyone, and thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time today. This is a impromptu rant, so I appreciate you indulge me, and I hope you'll stick around for it. It's just a few minutes. Listen, out of respect and common decency, I wasn't going to jump in on all of this talk in the last day or so after the tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, the conservative influencer. But I've been following it closely and reading and listening to the other voices that are weighing in. And again, I wish I could stay silent on this, but I just can't anymore. Look, it is long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree. That sounds about right, doesn't it? And I think that's a sentiment that most of us have. I didn't say that, by the way. I did. I just said it. But I was reading from a quote from Donald Trump. And that's what's got me going, right? I'm going to read it again. It's long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of the demonizing of those with whom you disagree. Couldn't have said it better myself, Mr. President. But for him and for all of you who support him and think he can do no wrong, are you hearing it? Are you hearing it? Do you get it? I mean, does anybody in this country demonize their adversaries, their political opponents, anyone who dares to disagree with them? Does anybody demonize them more than Donald Trump? Anyone? Now, listen, I agree with that sentiment, and I know it works both ways. I know the extremists on the far left have contributed to this problem too. I can't believe we're here in this place where we're looking for someone to blame for Charlie Kirk's murder yesterday, somebody beyond the person who pulled the trigger. I can't believe it. But it's the president who said, we got to stop demonizing people. In fact, his quote goes on to say this. I'm going to read it again. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's mass murderers and criminals. He added, this kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop now. Again, I couldn't agree more with the president, right? And there is some of that. There is some extreme, insightful language on the left, no doubt about it. But I'll say it again, does anybody engage in that more than Donald Trump? Now, if you're one of his followers and you don't like the fact that I'm going after the president, be clear about this. He is the president of the United States. And if you don't see this, if you can't see this, I don't know what can make you see the obvious truth. I don't know why it's so hard to get off your position of thinking that it's all the other side's fault. Why you can't look at your guy and say, yeah, he's kind of doing it too. Because he is. And the fact of the matter is he's president of the United States. He's supposed to be the leader we look to not do these things, to walk us back from the edge when we as citizens sometimes get tempted into these kinds of destructive games and behavior. He's the president. He's supposed to be the one leading us to a better place. And here he is telling us that we've got to stop with this dangerous rhetoric, this demonization of people we disagree with, while he's doing it. Like he just did in the next paragraph. It's the liberals, right? Now, again, if you've watched my show, and I hope you have, PepTalks, you got to tune into it. You know that we talk constantly about the extremes, and that's what's going on here. The extremes on both sides who don't want to solve problems, that just want to point fingers at the other person. None of these so-called leaders want to take responsibility for themselves. They don't hold themselves and their own folks accountable. It's always about the other side. And you know why that is? It's because that's how they make money and accumulate power. They're stealing our power. They're whipping us up, and they're getting millions of us. Like some of you folks who support the President Trump, even in light of what he's saying here, they convince us to play that game and to hand over our power to them. That's what this is. It's a huge power grab. And if you think the president isn't playing it, you are grossly mistaken. He's not just playing it. He's the master of the game. He's leading it. He's our president. He's supposed to be the one who acts better at times like this, but he's leading us down this path. And again, I'm not excusing the liberals, the Democrats, the other extreme. I'm not. But the president, don't you agree, has extra special responsibility because he's the president. Look, I don't want to let this go by without going to the next quote, which is from his idiot son, Eric. You know, why anybody talks to, well, he was talking to Sean Hannity, so I guess that answers your question. But you know what he said? He said he's sick and tired of seeing all the bullets. They're only going one way. He said they're only going one way. You mean like the killing of the and shooting of the legislators in Minnesota, my old neighborhood right down the street from where I used to live? Those are Democrats. Or like the attack on the Democrat governor of Pennsylvania, Eric, idiot. Come on. This goes both ways. Now, it may seem lately like it's been going one direction, but it's not. It goes both ways. Extremists on both sides. By the way, make no mistake. The extremists who pull the triggers on these things, they want to blow things up. They want to watch the world burn. They want to get it started. And people like President Trump and some extremists on the left and other people are only too happy to play that game because they wanted to. Because that fight and that fire works for them. Why do we give it to them? If it's our guy, right? If you're a supporter of the president, why would you look the other way? Why would you deny your common sense that tells you that this is all wrong? Why would any of us fall in line with those extremes when we can see it comes from both sides? Why do we do it? Look, I am like everybody else. I am sickened and saddened and just feel horrible for Charlie Kirk's family, all the people who care for him. What a tragedy. What a tragedy. But it happens in the midst of this bigger, really urgent problem that we have in this country. And it's a failure of our leadership, but it's also our failure as citizens to hold our leaders accountable, to not let them get away with this. So when they say stupid shit like this, that those of us who support them say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why don't we do that? Why don't we put our hands up and stop them right in their tracks and say, wait a second, Mr. President, I support you, buddy. I love you. Right? But you're doing it too. Don't sit here and tell us that this demonization of our political opponents has to stop right now when you're doing it as you speak. That's exactly what you're doing. Now, there's one other aspect to this, and I can't let it go by again without mentioning. There is something to be said, right? When the demonization is the truth, because the truth needs to be said, right? So if the demonization is that Trump and his administration and his movement, if you will, resembles in history some very, very bad, troubling things like Nazism, like the rise of Hitler, like those kinds of things. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, man, it just might be a freaking duck. And to say that, I mean, let's put it this way. What Trump is saying in part to me is stop calling me names because you're encouraging people to shoot at us, right? But if you call a duck, is that a crime? If he is, if the far right has gone, the extreme right has gone off that cliff into autocracy, into authoritarianism, into something that is very eerily similar to the beginning of the Third Reich, should we not say it for fear that that might unleash a problem? Nope. We've got to speak truth to power, as they say. But we've got to do it responsibly, right? And we all need to rise up as one to put down this kind of insanity when these wackos come out with their guns. Everybody needs to be on the same play sheet. But for the president to point the finger at his political adversaries and say it's their fault because they're demonizing him and his followers, when that's all he does is demonize his political opponents. That's all he does. Well, none of us should stand still for that, starting with his strongest supporters. You just can't continue to blindly follow that garbage. You've got to be willing to stand up and hold your own side accountable. You can never in this world hold the other side accountable when you refuse to hold your own side accountable. To be honest with you, that's the whole thing behind Pep Talks. That's it. We have got to start holding our own people accountable before we can expect accountability from our philosophical adversaries, right? Our political adversaries. We have to do it. So I'm calling on you, Trump followers, to be willing to speak up against your fearless leader. You don't have to stop supporting him. I respect that. You support who you support, but don't defend this garbage. And the same thing for you people, you everyday regular folks who call yourself Democrats. Call out your side when they cross the line and they go too far. Call them out. Now, I know, depending on which side you are, it very well looks right now like, and over the last few years, like the other side is worse than we are. But don't fall for that either. Don't play that game. They're worse than us. It's all bad. It's all bad. And we need to start coming closer together to put it down. Hey, look, if the president doesn't want to be demonized as a Hitler-like Nazi, then stop acting like one. How's that, for starters? Stop freaking acting like one. Follow the rule of law and stop demonizing your political opponents. Everybody, including people who used to be cabinet members of yours, who all of a sudden are dumb as rocks. Right? Stop demonizing everybody who dares to resist or to disagree with you in public. Right? That's the bedrock of America, is civil disagreement. That's what Pep Talks is all about. So enough already. Enough. And God forbid, let's stop putting ourselves in a position where after an event like this, which are going to happen, by the way, where it's a rough world we live in, right? These things will happen, whether we do everything right or not. But let's, for God's sake, stop putting ourselves in a position where everything has to be this political struggle. Let's start using common sense for a change. Let's start bringing this country back together. That's the president's job, by the way. Bring the country back together. But even as he supposedly is trying to, right, by telling us all we got to stop demonizing, that's what he's doing. He's demonizing and he's dividing us further. He can't help himself. That's who he is. That's why some of us have had a problem with Donald Trump from the start, because that's who he is. Has nothing to do, I digress, but it has nothing to do, oftentimes, with his policies or this or that. It's who he is. The kind of person that can attack and criticize everybody, right, for being whatever, in this case, demonizers, while he's doing that very thing himself. See it. I hope some of you have not just turned this off because I sound like a crazy man and because you don't like it when people criticize your guy. I hope you could open up your brains and your eyes and your ears long enough to see the real truth here. And really, you should have seen it by now, but this is a perfect window. I'm going to close by reading it again. Trump's quotes. It is long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. That's from our president. No disagreement. Probably from almost any of us. No disagreement. How about it starts with you, Mr. President? How about you not just say something like this, by the way, while you're actually doing it, demonizing? How about it starts with you? How about you take a higher road and you set a better example for the rest of us? How about we start with that? How about every time something like this happens of any kind to anybody, all you do is say it's wrong and call out those and demand that the law hold those responsible to account? How about that? All of us. Nobody's above the law, Mr. President, including you. But how about you lead with your powerful words and your platform and your megaphone, your bully pulpit? How about you lead that way for a change? We deserve no less. We deserve no less. I'm done, everybody. Listen, I'd love to hear your comments, but really, I'm sorry for the rant and for the frustration. I trust you can and I hope you'll understand it. And as always, I'm happy to take your comments and have an exchange or a dialogue with you. But we've all got to get together, and the leaders like our president and our Congress and the political people and whatever, they're not going to do this. They're not going to they're not going to do what they need to do. They're not going to do the right thing anytime soon. It's going to be up to us to make up. So tune into Pep Talks, and we'll talk more every week about what we can do to put pressure on our elected officials, our leaders, to do right by us at times like this and at all times, really. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for checking it out, giving me a few minutes of your time. And I look forward to our next talk. Thanks, everyone.